Hi everyone, I'm Tara Lon. Welcome to Time Out with Tinseltown Mom. This is our first show for 2020, and I'm super excited about our special guest today. I'm here with Emily Lynn Paulson, author of Highlight Reel: Finding Honesty and Recovery Beyond the Filtered Life. Emily is also a wife, mother to five, speaker, network marketing leader, certified professional recovery coach, and has recently celebrated 3 years of sobriety. Today, we're going to be talking about Emily's road to recovery from alcoholism, plus discuss alcohol abuse and motherhood. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
So let's start by learning a little more about you and your family dynamic. Can you share a little glimpse?
Sure. Like you said, I have five kids. My oldest will be 15 in a couple of days. He's getting his learner's permit, which is super exciting and scary.
Yes, it is.
And then I have three girls who are 13, 11, and 10, and another little boy who is 7. So all packed in a pretty short range of time.
Very short.
Very short, but so great. I love having a big family. And my husband and I have been married for just over 15 years. We live in Seattle, and for the last 6 years, I've worked for a skincare company. Before that, I stayed at home with the kids for, since they were born. And prior to that, I was a chemist and a chemistry teacher. So a little bit of a odd change of careers for me. And in the last 3 years, like you said, I've gotten sober, and through that process, I wrote this book. So that's kind of how I got here and who I am. And we live in Seattle. Did I mention that?
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yes. Okay. Yep, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah, so I did read your book, Highlight Reel, from cover to cover, and I must say it was very captivating. If I had the time, I would have read it in one sitting, but I just didn't have the time to do it. So I think I read it over a few days though. So I have one perspective of what I thought the book was about. How do you describe it to people?
So I think if you've seen the cover, obviously it's a phone with a bunch of Instagram pictures, and so I think from first glance, people think, oh, it's social media, and it really is. It's a lot of layers. There's pictures of obviously me, look like I'm having a great time. I look super happy, but if you look closer, you'll see I have a glass of alcohol in my hand. I either have a wine glass or a margarita, in every single picture. So kind of how it knitted its way into my life. And also just how I was showing all of the good things. I was showing, this is the person I was showing. I'm this happy person. I'm this mom. Everything's put together. But the reality was very different. I was actually struggling and really unhappy and depressed and struggling with addiction. So I think whether or not people struggle with any sort of addiction or trauma, I think this is very relatable in the sense that we are inundated with everyone's pretty happy photos, and we don't necessarily see what's going on behind the surface. So it's kind of reflective of that. And then obviously the phone is the lens that I was showing myself through, and that we all do on social media.
And I love how you tell the story chronologically. So what grabbed me is at 8 years old, you thought there was something wrong with you. Now, were you referring to mental illness when you said that?
I think for me, it was just I didn't have a strong sense of self. And I'm sure you could go back and try and pick apart why, or, I could try and dissect the reasons, but it just was what it is. That's what I thought, was that I just, for some reason, wasn't good enough. And I think that's something that kids struggle with. I realized, having my own kids, that, kids do struggle with their own their own identity and their self-esteem really a lot earlier than maybe we acknowledge.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was more just reflecting on why, I didn't feel necessarily good enough as a young child. So whether that's the reason I kind of went along this path of addiction and destruction, or, is it the chicken or the egg? Was I born that way? Or
Right.
was there a reason I became that way? But I think it's just important to note, because I have talked to so many people who also say, gosh, I felt different when I was younger. And maybe at the heart of it, everybody feels different, and you just don't acknowledge it.
And then you had this, of course, this horrific trauma that happened to you at 12 years old. And I know you mentioned some thoughts of depression. Did that come into play before that horrific trauma, or did that come in afterwards?
So it looking back, I think I did have some of those, depressive thoughts prior. But it was really just my feelings of not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to upset anybody. And really, even at that young of an age, I had learned that I just wanted to put things away, shut the lid and sit on it. I didn't want to necessarily talk about things. And so by that point, I had already learned kind of to keep my feelings inside and put on a happy face.
Right, right. Now, I know you mentioned, just lying and just getting by, telling people what you thought they wanted to hear. So I could see how that's all connected. So for you, when did the drinking start?
So it was early in my teen years, and it wasn't anything that I would look back and say I was necessarily immediately a binge drinker. I would say that I fit into what the quote unquote normal teenage experimentation would look like. And unfortunately, that is one of the things that does disguise problematic drinking. Obviously, I was drinking to cope. I was drinking to fit in. I was drinking for a lot of the reasons that teenagers drink, but it kept it hidden. I didn't feel like I looked any different than any of my peers around me.
So when you started as a teenager, did you continue it throughout adulthood, or were there seasons while you were a teen where you stopped it and you didn't feel like you needed it or wanted it?
Yeah, there definitely were seasons, and looking back, it was during those times when I maybe did feel more secure, when I had a really calm period of time where I had a steady boyfriend who was real level headed, or when I was in these more steady seasons of my life. And honestly, that was one of the reasons I justified, oh, I must not have a problem, because I was able to stop for periods of time. But when I did drink, it was generally problematic. It wasn't just having a drink, it was having several. And when I started to have blackouts. So it wasn't always a problem. And I didn't have trouble every time I drank, but anytime I had trouble in my life, I had always been drinking, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. And when did the blackouts start? Like, how old were you when that started?
I remember having some when I was in high school, honestly.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't regular. I think I had one or two, maybe. In college, it happened a lot more. Maybe once or twice a month, I would have a blackout. And as I, grew up into adulthood, again, I did take lots of time off of drinking. I mean, I stopped drinking 5 times for 5 full-term pregnancies, 9 months at a
Right,
time.
right.
But every time I went back to it, the blackouts continued to get worse, and it started to become where my very last blackout, it was a completely benign evening of having dinner and drinks with friends, and I couldn't remember not only that night but the days prior. So it started to become where I was blacking out not just my drinking events but just my life. So it only increased over time.
And then just going back to the book, because again, there's so many layers to your story and just maybe what led to the drinking and the abuse of it. You had several traumatic events actually that happened in your life, and it made me like understand you better, as far as like
Mhm.
your struggles. When you were younger and before you met your husband, did you ever get any type of treatment for some of those traumatic events that happened to you?
I did see counselors here and there, but I always assumed that I was fine. I always convinced myself that everything was okay. And I did get treatment for an eating disorder after college. And the problem that I had was that I wasn't fully disclosing everything. I would
Right.
talk about the one thing. Okay, I have an eating disorder, and let's talk about that, and let's get me on a good eating plan, and we'll do this therapy, and we'll do this and that, and I would check those boxes. But I wasn't dealing with the whole picture. I wasn't talking about this trauma from when I was younger. I wasn't talking about trouble I had gotten in with the law. I just wasn't connecting all of the dots. I was living very compartmentalized. And so I really was never able to get down to the heart of the issue, the heart of the trauma that I had had and the feelings that I had about myself. So whether or not I had treatment or saw a counselor, again, I was just never able to treat the whole person. I was never able to treat the root causes.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then alcohol, what did that do for you, like during those times when you were masking, all this hurt and this pain? Like, what was that for you?
Really, it was a numbing, like an anesthesia almost. It obviously it took down those feelings rather than having to sit and feel anger or depression or anxiety or just self-loathing. It was a lot easier to take a drink and kind of have that all melt away. And so it worked in the sense that I didn't have to feel those feelings, but again, I wasn't working through them. And then what happens with alcohol is that those feelings do rebound, especially anxiety. It ends up making anxiety worse. So it was this double-edged sword and this vicious cycle where I was drinking away the feelings, and then the feelings would come back worse. So I would drink more, and so on and so on.
Right. And so you were dealing with anxiety and depression at that time as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So were you treating those mental illnesses at the time, or?
I did try medications on and off for years, and unfortunately, I would use a certain medication and maybe it would work, and I would think, okay, I'm better now, and I would go off of it. Or again, I was drinking this whole time, and if you know antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, you aren't supposed to drink on them.
Mm.
So I was not only using it incorrectly, but also just kind of backfiring. It was really backfiring because I was drinking at the same time. So not able to have it work effectively or just having it not work at all.
Wow. Yeah. You're making the situation worse, really.
Hmm. Hmm.
So fast forward, you meet your husband. Can you talk about that experience when you met him?
Yeah. I was in this place where I had left a crummy, toxic relationship, and I was moving on, and you saw the theme, I'm sure, in my book about how I kind of did that. I would geographically um, kind of start over. I'd
Mm-hmm.
get
Yep.
go to a different school or move to a different place, and I would kind of again compartmentalize and leave that life behind me and start this new life. So I was kind of in this place where I thought, okay, I've graduated from college. I've got this great job now. I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I met my husband, and I just thought, okay, this is me. It's new. I'm starting over. And he was so different from anybody who I typically dated because he was very, he wasn't a toxic person. He was very normal and level-headed and smart and successful and responsible. And we just really hit it off, and I was able to be vulnerable with him. Um, Again, to a point, but more than I had been with anybody up to that point.
I think you mentioned also, I don't know if I heard you in an interview or that was through your book where you talked about how you guys met, and then as far as your drinking, you kind of did that together. It was
For
comfortable. Can you talk
sure.
about that a little bit? What that looked like, the drinking with your husband, or before you
Yeah.
got married and then into your marriage?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think early 20s, again, it's one of those things where everybody does it. It's really a culture of drinking where we would go out on dates to bars and we would go out dancing and drinking. And so it kind of became the activity. And again, it does for a lot of people and a lot of young couples that age. We were very social. We had parties, we had friends over. It was just kind of what we did. So we sort of built this relationship around drinking. And for him, he could really take it or leave it. And for me, it was really, it started becoming more and more of a fixture of something that I kind of needed um, to get by.
Yeah. Did he notice any of this behavior, like as far as the drinking and the over drinking, I guess?
For sure. I mean, we would get, and again, hindsight's always 2020, but we would get in, more fights when I was drinking. I would, kind of have erratic behavior when I was drinking, and it would cause issues in our relationship. Um, and looking back on that now, we can say that. But at the time, again, it kind of seemed normal because it sort of looked like other relationships of other friends we had. And that's just kind of what happened when you had too much to drink, right? We rationalize things really well at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, did he know about some of your struggles and your past before you guys got together?
He did, and I was again, I was able to be honest to a point. He knew that I had had this trauma when I was younger. He didn't know all of the details around it, but at that point, I really had never told anybody. And so for me to even tell a little bit of the story, I felt that I was saying enough to get it off my chest and to connect. But again, looking back, I never said enough to really create the full connection or really um, get it out the way I needed to. But I would say to that at that point, he was the person who knew the most about me of anybody. But I
Right.
always got to the point where I thought, gosh, I just don't want to scare him away.
Mm,
I don't want to
right.
freak him out. This is just too weird. So I always toned down the story I told about it. I would make it, I wasn't quite as young or whatever it was to make it okay for the other person listening, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like I
it
always wanted to
does.
make people comfortable with what happened to me.
So fast forward a little bit more. So now you're married, you have 5 children. So just going back to the alcohol, now did you find, now I know there's periods where you weren't drinking because of course you were pregnant, but when you
hmm
were able to drink, did you find that you were abusing alcohol all throughout? Did you find that you were abusing alcohol?
Um, I don't think, I really don't think that I was. However, when we would go out, and it was pretty rare at that point when we had so many little kids that we had time to do more than go on a date night. But when we did, I would have, I would say too much. It would always lead to me getting drunk. It wasn't just me having a glass of wine with dinner. It was several glasses and me being super hungover in the morning. So when I did drink, it did look abusive, I guess I would say. But because of our lifestyle, we weren't going out partying. We weren't, it wasn't like I was dancing on the bar or anything like that.
Yeah.
We were doing we had to come home pretty early. So I think that tempered it a little bit. Um, and it really wasn't until I would say it was about when my youngest was 1 when we kind of started seeing obviously he was going to be our last child, and we had some more reliable childcare, and we took our first kid-free vacation, and all of a sudden I started to see this freedom and feel this freedom, and that's really where it started escalating.
Mm. So you said your youngest was 1 at the time?
hmm
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So what did the drinking look like at home with the children? I do remember reading where you said you had to have a glass of wine before you bathe them or a glass when you got out of the shower. Like, because, there's mothers that are listening that, maybe they're questioning their own scenario and wondering if they're
hmm
drinking too much or if they're an alcoholic even. Can you just kind of paint that picture in detail,
Sure.
like what that looked like at home? Like, how were you drinking? What did that look like? Was it a bottle a night?
Sure. Well, like anything, it started out pretty small. I really don't remember. Again, when my youngest was about 1, I don't remember drinking every day at home alone. But I found myself just having a harder time coping with the craziness and the chaos and the sound and I don't know exactly when I started drinking at home. But it started small. It started with a glass of wine, maybe while I was making dinner, or while I was giving the kids a bath. And then all of a sudden, that wine glass would get emptied, and then it would be 2. And it did slowly progress to a bottle at night. And by the time, I stopped drinking, sometimes it could be 2. If I had to open another one, I mean, I would sure be finishing it. And then I was able to rationalize on the weekends, maybe in the morning, if there was still some champagne left over. Oh, well, I'll have a mimosa. I mean, that's a
Mm.
breakfast treat, right? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
drinking in the morning. That's something you're supposed to do. And there were times then where I was home and maybe the kids were napping and the older kids were at school that I thought, oh, there's a beer in the fridge. Oh, that sounds good. I found myself wanting it more.
Mm.
So again, it was something that started small and just slowly increased. And again, it's that rebound effect where if I was wanting that 5 p.m. glass of wine, um, because of anxiety or whatever, that in the morning, that anxiety had just tripled.
Right.
Um, because I wasn't actually dealing with any of the reasons that I drank
No,
ever.
right.
I
Again,
was just
masking.
drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you could drink up to 2 bottles per night?
Yeah, there were definitely times I did that. And then I was, one thing too that I started noticing, or I guess, in hindsight, looking back, that I was doing is if I would meet a friend out for happy hour, I would have a drink before I left, and I would have a drink when I came back because I started becoming aware that I was drinking more than the people around me, and I also started hanging out with people who drank more
Mm,
so that I didn't look like I had such a problem. And and it became really an obsession for me. If I had, say, I had a book club or whatever it was around my house, everything always there was always alcohol involved. But I would be very aware of how much other people were drinking, or if they left a glass and it was still half full. I mean, I couldn't even comprehend that. Like, why would you leave that glass
yeah.
half full? Um, and so it became so much work in my brain to think about drinking. Do I have a bottle at home? It just became an absolute obsession.
But you were a functioning alcoholic, right?
Oh, for sure. And I laugh at that phrase now. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it because I understand what it means that you're getting by and nobody knows. But but I was definitely not like functioning. When I think of fully functioning, I mean I was hurting. I mean, on the inside, like I was dying, right?
Mm.
But to everyone else, yeah, I was functioning fine. I got the kids to school. They seemed like they were doing well. We seemed like we were doing well. So I think the idea of function is like we weren't really functioning, but it looked like we were.
Right, right. It looks like it to
Yeah,
everyone else.
for sure.
So what did that look like at home though? Let's say you drank too much.
Well, at that point, we had hired an au pair, and I think it gave me that safety net, so that I knew if I wasn't necessarily able, and I still was, I would still be, I could be buzzed, I could be a little bit tipsy, and I would still have that safety net. So it wasn't like when I was at home with the kids that I was just like passed out, throwing up drunk, but I was just um, fuzzy enough that maybe I'd lay down with a kid and then not wake up till the morning. And so I had that safety net of another person who would kind of pick up the pieces. And I definitely got used to that. I had someone else helping with the homework and double checking. And so, you know, again, it justified to me that things were going okay because we were keeping it together as far
Right,
as everybody else knew. Yeah.
right. And you had good help. So, that
Yep,
that helps a
exactly.
mom, of course. Can you talk about how alcohol abuse affected your health?
For sure. I had trouble. So I have a thyroid condition, which is not in itself a big deal. I've had it since I was in college, but I started having problems with it around that time. And normally adjusting my medication, would work, and it didn't. And so I ended up like becoming a vegan and doing all of these things when the reality was I was just drinking too much. My liver enzymes were off. And I don't know if it's the funny thing or the sad thing is that, no doctor really confronted me on it. And part of it was that I was not being honest about how much I was drinking. When you fill out the forms and it says how many drinks per week, well, even if you put one or two a night, that sounds like a lot. So I wasn't being fully honest on how much I was drinking. So they probably weren't able to make a connection.
Right.
But it was still never something that was ever suggested to me. Hey, maybe you should cut down a little bit, or maybe you should stop drinking and see how that goes. That was never offered to me. And so I did. I became a vegan, and again, my liver enzymes were off. I didn't feel great. Obviously, I was hungover a lot, and I was tired a lot. And I had to start planning my life around it. Like, was I going to go exercise? Or, oh no, I can't plan a class that day because I'll generally be drinking the night before. So it definitely affected my health, especially now looking back, knowing that some of the ailments that I had that I attributed to maybe just getting older or, being a mom or whatever it was really because I was drinking.
And then it really culminated into other bigger issues, like there was infidelity, suicide
Mhm.
attempt, but that wasn't the rock bottom point for you. What was? Can you just kind of share what that looked like for you?
Sure. Well, again, like I said, I had a blackout episode, and it was the last time I drank. It was the last blackout I ever had, and it scared me enough that again I had blacked out days of my life, and so I was just in my bedroom, and my husband was downstairs with the kids, and just listening to them downstairs and realizing kind of finally having being slapped in the face with all of these things that have happened and saying, okay, this is like erasing me. I'm erasing my memory. I'm erasing myself out of my kids' lives. Like I'm not able to be, fully present. It was just enough for me to realize like I was killing myself. I was basically looking at what my kids' future was going to look like without me. Truly. And, it was enough for me finally to reach out and get help.
And what did that help look like?
I had one friend who was in AA. And of course, now hindsight is 2020. I know lots of sober people now, and there were lots of people who weren't drinking, but you only pay attention to what you want to pay attention to. But she was somebody who was very open about the fact that she was sober. And I had connected with her a couple of times over the years. I'd sent her messages like, how do you know when you have a drinking problem? Because I did question it for a long time. And so I had her number in my phone. And I considered calling her many times. And finally, that was the day. And it was like almost like she was just waiting for me to call. It was like, oh, hi. And I said I needed help. And she said, come to a meeting with me. And that was really it. And so I always say one reason I've been so out there with my story is because of things like that. That the fact that she was open allowed me to, really change my life. And so that's something that I always am so thankful for that just one person was there and one person was open. And really she was the reason I was able to take that next step.
That's amazing. Now, is this someone that you used to drink with years ago?
No, actually, I only knew her as a sober person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what would you say to moms out there that maybe have questions like, and I know you get these questions a lot, like, am I an
Mhm.
alcoholic? Do I drink too much? Like, even if they're
Mhm.
just questioning that, like, what would you say to them? Like, what kind of advice could you offer up to them?
Sure. So I would say the question of whether or not I was an alcoholic agonized me so much. And now looking back, like it really didn't matter. Like if you're to that point where you're saying, am I an alcoholic or is this affecting me? You probably know that it's affecting you. Like it doesn't matter if you're an alcoholic. If you think that it's not serving you, try try cutting back, try not drinking. Just and I would say ask yourself when you reach for that glass, what am I feeling right now? And that was the thing that I completely never did. And I think that can really help you get to the bottom of whether you have a problem or not. Because it's a very different thing if you're like, oh, I'm having a steak, this red wine really goes well with it, and that's your feeling, or whether you're like, my kids are driving me crazy. I don't know how I'm going to get through this night. Where's the bottle? Those are two very, very different feelings. So I would say it just comes down to kind of asking yourself, am I okay with this? Why am I doing this? Do I need to? Is there some other replacement I can use? Is there something else that will fill this need that I have? Because I'm not a prohibitionist. I don't think alcohol should be illegal. I don't think everyone should be sober. Like that's not what I'm about. But I really do think that it's an easy go-to for a lot of people. It was for me, and just to be aware of it, and to question it and question the feelings and the reasons you're drinking in the first place.
Right. That's good. And can you just talk a little bit about the services that you offer right now, the coaching services?
Yeah. So professional recovery coaching is really kind of the bridge between say someone goes to treatment and they come out and they're really looking for someone to help keep them on the right path. And it's also for people who don't necessarily feel like they fit in the programs, the AA, or they don't feel like they're a rock bottom drunk. They're just questioning their relationship with alcohol. I work with women on all ends of the spectrum, and it's really about it's not about going back. It's not therapy. It's not about going back in your history and unraveling things. It's really about just making small goals to, get to the next level and really unlocking the part of yourself that is able to meet these goals yourself. And so it's kind of like a little, cheerleader in your corner. And so I work with lots of women one-on-one, in groups, online. And it's just really a great way for me to kind of give back and just increase awareness and help women walk through life, fully present and as themselves and not their dulled down, numbed out versions.
Right. I love that. And I love that you offer and provide so many resources on your website just for anyone who could just go and just get help if they need it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining me today. This was very thought-provoking, and I'm just praying that this helps some other moms out there who may be struggling or questioning, their own situation. Where can people find you if they want to know more about you and just reach out to you if they do want to have some counseling or coaching sessions?
For sure. So my website is just my name, EmilyLynnPaulson.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Highlight Real Recovery.
Thanks for listening to Time Out with Tinseltown Mom. If you liked what you heard today, please be so kind and rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time.